Well, hello, everybody. How are you today? Awesome. My name is Grace Kurtz. I am your Community Relations Manager at Hargray for Bluffton. I'm the one who helped facilitate this meeting, and I think there's going to be a lot of great information coming through with things that we're doing, things that we have been doing, things that we are planning to do. If you don't recognize my team, this is Benny Mullins. He also works with me, and then Chad Erie. Yes, and then we have Wes Dungeon, who came in from Cable One, who purchased Hargray in May of last year. So we'll talk about that as well. And then I will let him tell you his title. My title is Senior Director of Product Technology Management and Support. So I'm over all of the networking, phone, video, engineering teams located in Phoenix, and also the ones that came on board as a result of our acquisition of Hargray. So thanks for having us here. Yes, absolutely. And then we have Joel Braun, who is the GM for Hargray and Bluffton. So hello, everyone. Good group to sit here and ask questions. So Joel will start off. He'll talk a little bit about what we've been doing and kind of get the ball rolling. And then we'll start with questions at the end.
Yeah, so I did not fly in from Phoenix. I actually live in Bluffton, but I work on Hilton Head, Beaufort, and in Bluffton. But I'm happy to be in front of you today because Bluffton is my favorite of all three. So, we're here to talk to you about some of the experiences you've had with our services, and ultimately we're going to get to what we're doing about it, what we have done, and what we are continuing to do. In its simplest form, if I go back to 3-4 years ago, and I'll bring it up to the current pretty quickly. We invest millions of dollars every year in our network to keep up with demand. Every year, like clockwork, we continue to invest. And we based our investment on usage and what we project that usage to be on a go-forward basis. Well, we underprojected in the most recent year because we didn't anticipate the significant growth in our network that we've seen for reasons like work from home, a lot of need for upload speed. We planned for a lot of that. So we planned to more than double our network, but the growth has been so significant that we got a little bit behind. And then when we got behind, that may have culminated in an outage. It was related to something else, but on Christmas, we had an outage. And then subsequent to that time, we've had some days where at peak usage, you really can't get the speeds that you're accustomed to getting and that you should be getting. And so we've addressed the underlying symptom there to fix that issue in the short term. And we have a long-term fix that will address that issue, hopefully forever. But so I guess I'm interested in hearing from you, and I know we'll get some feedback today. Has anybody seen an improvement in service over the last 2 to 3 weeks? No? Has anybody seen? Yeah. I mean, yeah. Okay, so you've seen some of the results of that. But basically, what we did is we addressed capacity issues. Okay, and we'll continue to address capacity issues. And you'll hear more about Cable One's process for this. In Hargray, we looked ahead to fix issues. We didn't look as far ahead as Cable One does to fix them forever. So I'm really happy that we were bought by a company that's publicly held with deeper pockets so that we can do what we need to do and take service issues out of the equation other than the one-offs that are going to happen because electronics are very complex and things happen. So we've addressed the underlying theme for those capacity issues. We have more work to do, but what we have seen is a drastic reduction in trouble tickets. So that is always a leading indicator as well. Not always, but typically is a leading indicator that things are getting better. Not always, but so that's the core issue. We're going to get into a lot more detail. We'll try not to keep it make it too technical. But I'll hand it back for now. If there's anything else that you guys want to add to that.
I'll add to it before I have Wes talk. So inside Moss Creek, the cabling that's in the ground is what's called HFC. It's hybrid fiber coax. So it's fed by fiber lines. In this neighborhood, you're 1 gig capable, which is as fast as you can get in any brand new build going in. I know a lot of people ask, why don't we have fiber? Why don't you guys put that in? The short answer is you would notice zero connectivity difference, zero usability difference. The only real differences are those boxes on the exterior of your home. Your HFC network, really how it works and the speeds that we're able to get in here, and West will go into it a little bit more. It's capable of a lot more than a gigabyte. It's capable of 30 to 50 gigabytes, which is well far past where we're even at. And it's really because of the equipment that's hung on each end of the lines, and then things that are called nodes and amplifiers. And I think Wes can break it down a little bit better of like the 3 pillars on how the technology works and everything.
Yeah, so an easy way to think about it, when we look at the delivery of your services from the home all the way to the internet, there are 3 fault domains or domains where we would consider there is equipment and infrastructure to deliver that service. The first is what we call CPE or custom. Yeah.
I do have a microphone right here.
Yeah, So can you hear me better now? All right.
Yes.
So the first is what we would call customer premise equipment. And so that is everything from the modem that we give you in your home and all of your devices and everything within the home. So that's one area that is there for the delivery of the product. And that could potentially obviously have a fault as well. It could be our modem, could be devices, could be wireless radio interference, could be wiring, could be a multitude of things. The second area is what we would call the access network. So the access network is everything that all the cables that run up and down the streets and all the fiber lines that she illustrated as a hybrid fiber coaxial network that run to one of our data centers. And then the third part is the data center upwards to the internet, which is what we would call the core network. So the capacity issue that Joel mentioned earlier that we resolved, that was ongoing for a series of weeks, that was a core network capacity issue. And so once we addressed that core capacity issue, that was affecting the entire community of Bluffton in general. So that issue has been addressed. We found that we were able to get components in there. We weren't able to get them as quickly as we'd like. I'm sure you guys all watch the news like I do, and you're aware that there are supply chain problems. Just to give you some perspective, if I order hardware today from one of my vendors, it's 200 days until they deliver it. And that's best case scenario. So we were able to find some additional hardware, and we paid more money to get it in here and get it installed to alleviate that problem. But those are the 3 areas of the network we have. There are always issues and problems that can arise in those areas. Cable One aspires, and it's an aspirational goal of having 100% reliability. Is that always 100? Is that attainable? Realistically, as somebody who is a technologist, I would tell you no, because we're always going to have failures, right? But that doesn't mean we're going to strive. We're not going to strive for that. So Joel talked about the planning cycle, that kind of the differences between Hargray and Cable One. Hargray was building up this business, and Cable One bought it. Cable One is a company that's been acquiring businesses that were built up, but our intent is to run them. We're not looking to build up our company and boost our stock price to sell it to somebody or get a higher multiple on the market. We are building this company to run, and because of that, we have 5-year capital planning practices in place. So we look 5 years out. We plan on where we're going to invest the hundreds of millions of dollars every year that we spend from a capital standpoint to upgrade all of our capacity, all of our plant, all of our infrastructure to make sure that we're able to deliver services well into the future. In addition to that, we have consistent upgrades that happen on the core network, on the access network, and then also we plan on upgrades for the customer premise equipment. So that's the devices that we put in your home. So we look at all that stuff. We plan a capital budget for that for 5 years in advance. But in reality, when we talk about the evolution of the network, we are actually planning 10 years out right now for where that evolution goes. And so where that evolution goes with the existing infrastructure that we're talking about, the hybrid fiber coaxial network, that plan is to get to multi-gigabit speeds and have them be symmetrical, which means you have the same amount of upload speed as you do download speed, and eventually to get to 10 gigabit per second delivery to the home. So I'm a member of, there's a few different organizations out there. The first one is Cable Labs. That's a nonprofit organization. And it is basically a research and development arm for all the cable companies. So every cable company in the United States pays membership dues to this organization. And they have innovation engineers there that work on all the technology that makes cable modems work and cable internet work, cable television and the phone services we provide. And so that research and development arm is constantly looking for new iterations of the technology we use to deliver internet and looking for ways to take the existing infrastructure we have to the next theoretical limit and push that envelope constantly from a bandwidth perspective. So at one of their trade shows, we saw a Chinese company named Huawei. We don't actually buy their equipment, but they demonstrated, it's funny, the government's actually paying people to take Huawei equipment out of their network, people who have bought it, because obviously we don't want to have that kind of risk on our infrastructure. But in any case, they demonstrated over the piece of cable that we would run from the line that runs under the streets, or in some cases, in some communities, not yours, obviously, but aerial lines. They had the cable that runs from that into the house. They were able to get 30 gigabits per second, and this was 4 years ago, 30 gigabits per second symmetrical over that span of cable. So, right now, the best fiber technologies that we can put in homes are capable of getting 10 gigs symmetrical, best case scenario, and that costs an astronomical amount of money. So the technology that we have in place is sound. It's something we can continue to use and invest in. We have to do our work to add capacity and to maintain it, which is all of that capacity planning and capital cycle that we talked about. We have to constantly look at evolving the devices that we're giving you in your home so you have an optimal experience. But we have to do our part. But the technology is sound and capable well into the future. And so that's just a little bit about the technology. I'm happy to answer any other questions. I can go really deep in technology, or I can keep it high level. You have a question?
Is this a technology question, or are you going to get to the nitty gritty yet? I have a question.
Please.
And I've gotten, it's almost like trying to talk to the CDC about COVID. You get a different answer every day, and different when people call, to talk to. And I believe I spoke to you at one point, and even then it's
Most
changed. Here's the question. I keep getting emails about mail going away. Now, what I have is I have Hargray for my internet, and I use Office. I use
Office 365 or Outlook, Microsoft Office.
I use whatever is on. I don't know why my mind is gone blank. Probably because I'm old. And is it going away? Isn't it? I get so many spam as it is telling me I need to push here and give my information, which I never do. So is it going away? Do I need to have to change my email address? It's Outlook I was trying to think of.
Yeah.
I use Outlook, but I'm using Hargray as my character.
Yeah.
So what's the story? What's the real story?
So I can tell you from a Cable One perspective, and then Joel and Grace might be able to provide you some additional details. So Cable One also offered email accounts with internet, and everybody did when it first started off, but every large cable operator out there has done away with that. And the reason being is that there are tons of people who do email on the internet, like Gmail by Google, Yahoo, MSN, and quite frankly, they do it way better than we could ever hope to do it. The other benefit to those email, options is that if you move from, I'm just going to throw something out, you move from South Carolina to Seattle, you can take that email with you anywhere in the world, any environment you have. You're not reliant on us being your service provider to have that email. So fundamentally, we've seen a decline in the use across the board of service provider email addresses, and they've been going away. Cable One, 4.5 years ago, 5 years ago, had around 400,000 active email accounts that were on our servers. And we've actually dwindled that down to 4,000 over the span of 4 years. So people who weren't using them, which was 90+% of them, there was an aging process that took place that removed and eliminated those email accounts, but people who are actually using them, there's been a couple-year campaign to reach out to those people, help them migrate to a new email platform. And I would suspect that eventually Hargray email will go away, and we would proactively communicate that well in advance, and that we would be available to help people and give them options to migrate away from it. I don't know if you have anything. to
Yeah,
add.
I do. I want to add, because I get, what you're getting is spam. It's bad guys who are trying to get you to click on their links. I get 50 of them a day. We get them in our office and they say Hargray is going to change their email. They're not legitimate. When it becomes something that we do, we'll have 6 to 9 months notification. It'll be very formal communications with our logo. I'm sure that Grace will be in communication with the board and the community. It is not these spam emails that come from all kinds of Hargray.com email addresses, but if you look at the origin, they're just made up Hargray.com email addresses.
I'm glad you told me.
Yeah,
And we
all
have-
spam. They'll say like maintenance
Yeah.
upgrade, or hey, we're shutting our system down. Don't believe it. Honestly,
I'm also
I
getting
get 20 to 50
50
of them a day.
I'm also getting $50 from about 1,000 different.
Yeah, and did you know you were related to a Nigerian prince?
It's paying you millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And so, we also haven't been giving out Hargray email addresses because the spam blockers that are on, your Gmails, your MSNs, your Outlooks, they're so much more effective than what we're able to do. We stopped giving out email addresses for Hargray about 3 years ago now.
Yeah.
So at some point we are going to be migrating off of that. It isn't right now, it's not tomorrow. But of course, if you don't want to receive as many spam, their spam filters on Gmail or anything else are far superior to our Hargray.com.
But when we do that, sir, we will have an education process to let people know how they can continue to get emails to that domain, how they can forward them from that domain, how you can move over your saved emails, et cetera.
So you'll help.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yep.
And
I
everything
finally
we
got an answer.
Yeah, and everything we've been discussing to this point too has been related to like HSD, so the high-speed data and internet. Television services work completely different, which if anybody has questions about that, we can get into that too. But I saw you raise your hand right there.
I got here a few minutes late,
Yeah.
and maybe the question's been asked, maybe it hasn't. Why does Hargray have a captive audience in Moss Creek? You're the only supplier that I know of that's giving us internet.
I can answer that. So I have been in this position, I've been with Hargray 5.5 years. I've been in this position about 3.5 years now. And at that point in time, Spectrum, who's the competitor in this area, was going around and they were offering communities. The only way that they would come in is on 2 kind of options. One, you pay an assessment of $10,000+ per home as a one-time fee for them to bring cabling in because it's quite expensive, or that you would sign a bulk plan, which means every single person in the community, if you used internet and TV services or not at that point in time, had to pay for it no matter what through the HOA. So it wasn't putting the HOA, the community, the residents in anything of a good fashion. And it's quite expensive to overbuild a community of this size, or really any community. 4 years ago, it was about $90 a foot. And if you think about it, you got to run it all the way down one section, all the way back, run cables to each individual house, add your amplifiers, your equipment, all that kind of stuff. And now with all the supply chain issues and everything else, unless it's a brand new development that has no homes or anything else to hit water lines, power lines, irrigation lines, dig under driveways, they're not going to do it. That's usually what it comes down to, unless the homeowners were to pony up a very substantial upfront cost or a guaranteed cost for a long time in the future. So that's how we originally put together, speaking with your board at that time and community residents and everything, the pricing, the special pricing that you have on internet services in Moss Creek. So that was one of the discussions that we had. So, your prices are locked in for the 5 years your term that you've had. You don't see increases like marketing's doing pricing increases on high-speed data every single year, about 10%. So there are significant advantages that you have for that, but that's the short and sweet of it.
Sir, if I can add just one thing, I think part of the reason that Grace didn't cover is the reason we're standing in front of you is because when Moss Creek needed service, we were the ones who said, we'll be glad to build there and put it into service. Now, we recognize and acknowledge that there's been some subpar service along the way, and we are extremely committed, and it is a priority for us to get that fixed, so that at that point, hopefully nobody worries about who the provider is or what the competitor is. We will continue to invest and get all of the issues eradicated to the extent that we can, and we think we can do a pretty good job of doing that. But the reason we're here is because we invested here when no one else would.
The reason I asked the question is because I'm very frustrated with just Hargray. Every time it rains, my system goes like a snail's pace.
Has that been recently too?
I could go to sleep and wake up 5 minutes later to get a connection.
Have you called it to technical service and has that been
Yes.
recent? Okay.
We set up
We
a
checked
meeting
inside
here,
wire.
and the gentleman never showed up.
Okay, we'll come up at the end and I'll get your name and everything. I'll make sure I get somebody to show up. I got connections.
Thank you, gentlemen. And,
You're right there, sir.
Just can you give us an update, like essentially the last 2 months? What have your findings been within Moss Creek? So what's causing the streaming problems? What's causing the TV outages? And what's causing the internet problems? Those are 3 different things.
Yeah.
One of the challenges that you have is that potentially every home in here has got a different configuration with regard to inside wiring. I mean,
Yep,
for
absolutely.
me, I have only the modem, but I use Eero as my Wi-Fi. And since changing out the router to the modem, I've had no issues. I'm getting what I'm supposed to be getting. Granted, the speeds deviate a little bit, but it's so stable now. Whereas last year when I had the router, it was a nightmare. I was having continuous outages.
Yeah.
So just if you give us a sense of what are the issues you've been finding in general in Moss Creek and how are
Sure.
you dealing with it?
So I can start on that a little. So the big Christmas outage was due to a power failure that fried equipment. And then the peak issue that you were noticing, like where people were having the bandwidth where they weren't just being able to get speeds or loading, that's the core capacity issue that is now being addressed. And there's been a lot of updates that have gone into that. The TV issue, Joel, do you want to get into that? There's been quite a few, like CBS, was it CBS today?
Well, it
MSN?
depends on what issue you're talking about. So
Okay.
today, CNBC and MSNBC lost their satellites. So every provider that used that satellite lost their service today. So we were one of the ones that, that wasn't a Hargray issue per se. Obviously, we deliver that to you, so you may not know the difference and may not care, and I understand that. Maybe you should pay us to deliver that, but that was beyond our control. We did get the satellites back up as quickly as we could. There have been other instances like that, but can you be more specific about?
Well, I mean, the things you're mentioning, I haven't experienced it. I only have Hargray internet.
Okay.
I've got DirecTV, but my internet, like I said, since I changed the modem,
Yeah.
the router to the modem, I have no
So
issues.
a couple years ago too, there's different modems and different routers that are on the market. Some of the previous models were what's called 2.4 gigahertz. Now there's 2.4 and 5G. So a lot of people don't know, but depending on what TV you have in your home or what laptop or what phone, chooses which bandwidth it can go off of. So 5G tends to have a shorter range. 2.4 is a larger range, but it's not quite as quick.
doesn't have as much bandwidth throughput.
Doesn't have as much bandwidth throughput to go for it. And then inside of it, depending on how the home is set up, where you place your router is very important. So like you said, every home in Moss Creek, every home in general in Bluffton is configured differently. So I like to think about it like this owl that's right here. If that's your router, if you think about your wireless waves that are coming off of it, it's like a fountain. So it's strongest near the center, and then the further that you get away, the more it dissipates. That works for walls or anything else. So there is a lot of systems that are out there that or mesh systems that are able to generate a consistent signal as you go through your home.
That Eero system that you referenced, it's
Right.
excellent. It's a
Yeah.
mesh system. It's doing the 2.4 and the 5G at the same time. You don't have to choose.
Right.
Depending on how you have it set up, your devices, depending on what they're doing and the signal strength you have, it's gonna give you 2.4 or 5G. You don't have to make that decision.
Yeah.
It's not like the traditional extenders that we used to have. The extender was like doing the smoke signals off the mountain now. So mountain A sends the signal up, mountain B picks it up, tells mountain 3 or C, and he repeats back to B, and that goes back to A. There's an inherent lag that was just, it was part of the system.
Yeah.
The mesh systems, it's like that dog guarding the river Styx. You got one dog with 3 heads working in all directions. And he's processing all that information, but it's still just one dog. It's far superior to the stuff that we've had covering wireless in the home that we've, had.
Right, but my point is just, I've only had the outage over Christmas.
Yeah.
That's it. Others, and again, it's not everyone, so you
Right.
talk about some of these issues, not everyone's having it, and I'm trying to understand, for those that have had issues this year, and even going back into last year, but this year more importantly, continuing to have issues after the changes that you've done and the upgrades and things like that. So for those that are still having issues,
Yes.
what are you finding are what's happening there? Because some of my neighbors, they've come out and they've replaced the connections outside. 2 weeks later, the TV goes out again, So how many times can we cut cables and change the connections? What are you finding are the main issues that you can address as opposed to sending out a tech to change the connections?
Yeah, so
And if you could speak to that as the internet versus the television would be helpful.
Right, well, that's why I
because-
asked in
Yeah.
3 buckets, because they
Yeah.
really are 3 separate
Yeah,
areas.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to take a shot at that, but, and whoever wants to jump in if you have anything else. For the internet, the systemic issues related to capacity, were related to capacity. Those should be addressed by now. If anybody's having other issues, then we need to know about it so we could try to diagnose what that is. Video is different, right? To your question, like, how do you treat different? So in what's called our head end, where we send our video out from, we have had a multitude of equipment swap outs. We've had some failures. We've also had some power issues there. For, I guess most recently, we lost power for a component that we've had multiple years, and we've never lost power on that device before. So that caused our video to go down for maybe an hour or a couple of hours a few weeks ago. So there've been a variety of different equipment issues. As we move forward in the Cable One footprint and under their leadership, we intend to look at all of that equipment, and we're going to replace what we need to. We're going to get out of what they call, is it PDU, is the power source, right?
Yeah, so it was a power distribution unit.
Yeah, so you don't, but that's not used within Cable One?
So we use power distribution units, but we have redundant power distribution
Yeah, that's
units
what it
so that, if one fails, we have another one to pick up the slack. But one of the things that Cable One does really well is life cycle management. So, a lot of video equipment specifically is very old. There hasn't been a lot of development in that world. It all is going to what we would call over the top or IP video. So that's, think of your Netflix and your Peacock network and, your Paramount Plus, all of those apps, right? So that's over the top video content. So there's not really a lot of investment that's happening in the traditional video delivery. So we have a lot of hardware out there that is old, and old hardware, just like an old car, is going to break down from time to time. So Cable One really spends a lot of money on upgrading that infrastructure. We call it lifecycle management, right? So every device, every piece of equipment we have has a useful lifespan. And so we monitor those lifespans, we prioritize the work that needs to be done to replace the devices that are past their prime. And then we make sure that we proactively replace those with hardware that's less likely to fail and more likely to have us move towards that aspirational goal of 100% reliability. Another thing just to note, you mentioned, you replaced your modem with Eero, and I think, obviously you've heard that that's a great device. Cable One and Hargray and everybody in the cable industry is spending a lot of time and energy focusing on cable modems, which we would call the gateway because it has a cable modem and it has a wireless router in it that provides you wireless connectivity. There's a new Wi-Fi standard, which is called Wi-Fi 6. That's available. That's what mesh extenders utilize to provide a better experience in the home. There's now a Wi-Fi 7, which has just been formalized by the standards committee that develops these standards. And they're actually working on Wi-Fi 8. if you would believe that. So there's a very long roadmap for these products, which is great. Cable One has put a lot of emphasis on this. Hargray's putting a lot of emphasis on this. So we're testing new devices more readily. We're testing a multitude of devices from a lot of different vendors. And our strategy is to be able to put better and better devices in people's homes so they have a better wireless experience. I think for a long period of time, people in the cable industry, what we wanted to do was say, we're going to put the cable modem in your house, and everything beyond that is your responsibility as the consumer. And the consumer over years has pushed back on that. You as the customer don't like that. Me as a customer, I don't like that, right? And so now the cable industry is accepting responsibility for the connection within the home. And that's really where the strategy of finding those better devices and putting them in the homes comes from. Unfortunately, right now, supply chain issues, again, you can't get those devices. They're very hard to buy in any large supply. The transistors, the resistors, the chipsets, all of those things, it's almost impossible to buy those things. And the lead time on these devices is 1 year, 2 years out. And even if you had a big order that you placed 2 years ago, the vendor is coming back to you and saying, I know you ordered 10,000, but I can only give you 8,000. And then they come back to you again and say, it's going to be 6,000. And then, sorry, it's going to be 4,000 that's going to arrive next week. So that's kind of the situation we find ourselves in right now. So we can't get enough of these new great devices to deploy them quickly enough, is really where we're at on those devices. But you're right, an Eero or a Plume device or any of the latest generation Wi-Fi 6 gateways that we can buy and finally deploy in our customers' homes will make a huge difference in the experience inside the customer's home.
And then a little caveat to that too. So now that we've fixed the capacity issues, when you were talking about the one-offs on what we're seeing, so we're really seeing one-offs, like where a customer is still having an issue and it's either a piece of wiring. About 2 weeks ago, there was a home in here that unbeknownst to the homeowner, when their landscaper was going through the drop that was actually running to their home, was nicked, and it was causing interference for some of the other lines because as internet comes in, it's actually shared bandwidth. So it's not like you're sharing each other's connection, but you're sharing it as a pool that's coming in. So everybody, even though that customer whose house had the nicked line wasn't feeling any issue coming through on their streaming, everybody downstream that was trying to do something was. So it's been little one-offs that are still being found. And if you are having issues, absolutely call into technical assistance. I cannot tell you how much it really helps, especially when things are happening in real time. There's so much that can be done without even deploying a tech, that they can look at your modem. They can look at, like, if you have a mesh system in your house, they can make sure that one, things are configured properly. They can see if there's drops. They can get a better idea of when the tech comes out to your home, where the issue could be stemming from, and be able to help diagnose that faster for you as well.
A couple of questions,
Yeah.
and you may have just covered it, but one is, when you do call the folks on the phone, are they able to determine whether my router is needs to be upgraded or not over the line, or does it take a technician to come out and look at it?
No, they'll
Absolutely, yeah, they can
So
say
they
it.
can
I
tell.
had one today that I looked at, and this is funny because it's to the day. Customer hadn't really been
Never
complaining a
called us.
lot, he never really had any troubles, but we had a meeting last night in their community. He's like, I'm not really getting the speeds. I looked at his account today. February 22nd, 2012 was when that modem was installed.
Yeah.
It's been working for 10 years, and he never called in trouble tickets, he was able to do what he needed to
And
do.
he's like, I just
But as
started noticing
soon as-
it's just not
Yeah.
working like it used to work.
As soon as I logged into his account, our system said HSD, high-speed data equipment needs to be replaced. So I called, left him a message, let me know when you want me to come by, we'll slap it.
So they'd tell us that if that was.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Second part B to that is, I mean, he's not in this room, but we have a new neighbor moved a couple doors down, and he's still working. And he's got your highest level of internet, 1 gig, whatever it is. And we have never had any problems until more recently, after he's moved in, quite frankly. Any chance any of that, he's affecting our speed? We have a router that's been in probably since 15,
Okay.
and we're hardwired to all the devices that we use to stream.
So there's enough capacity now that you shouldn't be being ill affected by what he's doing.
He doesn't work at Huawei, does he?
No, I don't think so. IBM, I think.
All right.
So if you are noticing, depending on what's happening, absolutely call in, because it could be like, you know, that modem in that house was 10 years old and
Yeah.
it's lasted this long. It was working great, but it's starting to fail.
Okay.
Those failures, you know, equipment, like as Wes was saying, cars get old over time, things start to need to be replaced.
Yeah.
That's what's happening. So absolutely call in and see if it's something like that, because your speed isn't determined on what he's doing now that those capacity issues in the core are fixed.
What is the average lifespan of the router? What would you recommend?
So I can tell you what I do. I usually swap them out every 4 years, is generally my recommendation. That's what I do in my own home. Depending on what your use case is, it could last longer than that. Like the gentleman who had one that lasted 10 years. So it depends on what you do. If you have a lot of wireless devices in your home and you download a lot of stuff and you have a lot of bandwidth, a lot of streaming and tons of people in your house, you know, that might even be a shorter window than 4 years. And it also depends on the device you have. My phone's sitting over there, but the wireless receivers and, you know, the interface cards that are on our devices, those constantly upgrade. And generally speaking, the devices, the mobile devices that we have in our homes, from a phone and an iPad perspective, those usually outpace what is available from a router and modem standpoint in terms of Wi-Fi delivery to your home. So depending on what devices you have, it could be 2 years. Like if you are, you know, a power user with 50 devices in your home and everything's the latest and greatest, you might need to upgrade even more quickly than 4 years. But we as a business generally look at cable modems as having a 3 to 5 year useful lifespan, to just give you our perspective.
Never hurts to power cycle them every other month or so too.
Yeah.
Kind of stop
Gentlemen in the
doing
yellow
and
shirt.
then pay attention again.
I've lived in the area for about 20 years, but I've only lived in Moss Creek for a couple of years. And our house was built at the end of 19. So everything in the house is relatively new as far as the lines. Previous communities that we lived in Bluffton, and well, not so much on the island. We had bad internet on the island as well. But the previous community we lived in Bluffton was a newer community. And we had very little issues with our internet or TV. As soon as we moved to Moss Creek in a brand new house, we have constant issues. And I'm wondering if it's the lines that were originally laid back in the 80s and 90s versus newer communities who have newer updated lines. Can it carry you guys talk about the technology being upgraded all the time, but can the lines in the community carry that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. A lot of people think because the lines have been here a while that they're outdated or older. And in reality, like they're pretty young in their lifespan. If we talk about Hilton Head, it's a great example. The main reason that Hilton Head was overbuilt when we hear with fiber is it had original copper piping. So the copper piping that was in there, there was no way, no matter what equipment you hung on either end, that it was going to supply anything more than 50 megabits a second. No matter what, you just can't do it. I mean, it's been in the ground over 150 years. And it degrades completely different than your HFC cabling that's in here.
So the most important thing for the cables that run in this community and others is not actually the cable itself. It's actually the components that allow us to get the signal to your home. So in that path, there are really three things. There's the fittings, which is, you know, where we intersect with the cable and where it runs into your home, and the fittings inside of your home. There is upstream from that. There is the amplifier. So we have amplifiers that amplify the signal. And then further upstream from that, where the fiber meets it, is what we call the hybrid fiber coaxial node. So essentially, those devices are the things that we upgrade along the path. They continue to get that useful lifespan out of the coaxial cable that's in the ground. That'll allow it to go years and years and years and years into the future, despite it being deployed here in the 80s. I don't know when the community was built, so apologize for throwing that date out there. It may not be accurate, but that's how we get that useful lifespan. So as long as the cable hasn't been damaged, And that's with somebody construction or, landscaper or somebody digging. That cable, if it gets nicked and some water gets in there or a rodent chews on it or something, that's an instance where the cable will need to be replaced, right? Some type of damage. Road crews do damage. I mean, there are a lot of things like that. And so when we see that, we'll see a multitude of cable modems in the community, and we'll see that their signal to noise ratio, which is really a measure of the quality of the signal moving to the home. We'll see that signal to noise ratio go up really, really low because there's a lot of noise on the line coming in, what we would call leakage on that damaged line. If we don't see that, we can consistently add capacity by changing out those components that I listed along the way for years and years and years to come. In fact, with DOCSIS 4.0, which is a new specification that's out there, we're going to be able to get symmetrical speeds in here, and that has roadmaps to get 10 gigs and beyond. So I'm very confident in that technology in the future, and otherwise I would probably be looking for a new job.
And a lot of that main cable, when we're talking low, it's 7 to 10 feet deep, like everything that was originally ran in here. What usually starts causing that interference is those lines that are, going from the street to the home. That's where they can tend to get nicked because they're only usually like a couple feet down at that point. So those are the ones that tend to get more damage over time and are replaced, just to specify a little bit.
Yeah, and it's also important to note that if your neighbor's cable has been nicked, as she said, that could cause an issue for people further down the street, right?
Yes.
So that's why it's important if you're having an issue and it's not something that's affecting the entire community, that you call in so we can look at it, identify it. Our technicians can come out, they have the meters, they can hook up to check the signal at different points, and they can hopefully find and isolate that bad stretch of cable where it's been damaged and repair that or replace it.
Yeah.
Also, if there's a fitting or an amplifier that needs adjustment or a node that needs adjustment, they can go and adjust those things as well.
That's something they do on a regular schedule. They go from each leg of the
Yeah.
journey in every neighborhood, maintaining it. In the wintertime, metal will contract, so the signals are gonna change a little bit. And in the summertime, they get longer because it's hot out. That's just from the weather. It's a living animal that they're trying to keep those signal levels where they're in the right spot where they're expected to be. So our cable maintenance department, that's most of the time, you think, oh, they're just fixing something when it breaks. They're maintaining the life of the whole
Yeah.
plant. So that's something, if there's something bad and they see like that noise level goes off, there's a reason and they just have to isolate it.
Yes, sir.
Like someone there mentioned, I had a problem about 6 years ago with the internet. And the person from Hargray, because what I had was, I had a combination modem and router. The person from Hargray said, you do yourself a favor, buy your own router and set ours back to where the router part isn't working. You won't get charged for it, number one, because they'll take away some of the charge. And number two, you're gonna get better service. This came from a Hargray person. Is that still the case? Is your modem / router still a problem? Should I keep my separate router?
So that's a great question. So I will say we don't always have the newest and best modems and routers that are out on the market. A lot of what you can get, is actually off-label, white labeled products, because you can't actually buy what is sold at Best Buy or anything, even though we have the same exact chips and equipment that's in our routers. But the big difference is, so yes and no. There is very capable equipment that keeps coming out. However, it's quite expensive. So, and with technology rapidly changing, depending on how you use it, you might need to switch it out every 2 years. Well, if that breaks and you're getting it from Hargray instead of paying your rental charge, now you have to go out and buy a new piece of equipment. If you have the equipment through us, we push all the updates, we can look at everything, make sure it's working. And then if it breaks, we can put a new one in free of charge and fix that for you. So it really depends on how you're using your system. Some people only want to use their own routers, which is fine. But is there always better that's coming on the market? There's always new technology that is coming on the market that's better. But they're constantly, the big difference with Cable One is they're constantly evaluating that all the time.
Yeah, and we have, we're buying many times more modems and routers every single year than Hargray was. So economies of scale benefit us a bit. I would say this, the top of the line, wireless mesh system, which we talked about a little bit earlier, like an Eero, costs $200 and something to have that, to buy that new. And so, you as a consumer, you're free to buy your own solution if you would like, but you're imparting some type of risk there, right? The risk is we can't necessarily support the wireless in the home because it's not going to work with our tools. So that we have limited amount of support we can provide you on a piece of equipment that you own and have bought. The second risk there is when it gets outdated, we're not going to replace it for you. You're going to be responsible for replacing and updating that technology. So there's a risk there. I think it depends on what your use case is, how tech savvy you are, and what kind of user are you in the home. If you're, again, one of those power users, people who are using tons of devices throughout the house, it might be advantageous for you to have your own. I live in Phoenix. We unfortunately cannot get Cable One service in Phoenix. Our corporate office is there. We don't service it. But I have Cox Communications, which is another large cable operator headquartered in Atlanta. And so I can tell you, I have a cable modem and I have my own router there because I like to think I'm tech savvy with my job. And so I can manage it and I don't mind updating it, regularly. And I'm always bringing new devices home from work to test in my home before we, start buying them to put in our customers' homes. So I'm somebody who would do that. My parents, on the other hand, they are not tech savvy, and I don't want to run over there every time to fix something. And so they have a product that's provided by Cox Communications because they don't want to buy a new router, every couple of years and have to update it. They want to be able to call Cox Communications and have them come out and replace it. So I think it really comes down to what your use case is, what your preference is. I wouldn't advise you one way or the other. I think everybody's choice is different.
The gentleman in the very back.
I just want to clarify one thing in my own mind. Is your hybrid system, your hybrid fiber system, as good or better than FTTP? Fiber to the premises?
You would notice absolutely no user difference, and
Even though you got those choke points out there at the pedestal box and the RG59, that's still gonna be as good.
it's still going to be as good. We can supply 1 gig over either modality. And if you
I do
think,
a lot of screening and I get a
Yeah.
tremendous amount of buffering. And I've changed out the router and the modem.
So fiber to the premise, which is FTTP, fiber to premise uses the same model. In fact, all service providers have the same model. So, you might have a gig. Everybody would say everybody in this room has a gig. We have shared bandwidth to a certain point on the network. And so in the hybrid fiber coaxial network, that's to the node. So we can just say, for the sake of argument, there's 10 gigs at the node, and every customer south of the node is sharing that 10 gigs. And so it's what you would call oversubscribed, right? And that's every service provider, that's every internet connection that's out there, with the rare exception if you have dedicated bandwidth.
That's to the node. What about to the pedestal box?
So to the pedestal box, that's the same thing as the node. Yeah, so in a fiber to the premise situation where you have fiber to the home, it's the same thing. The only difference is we have a port somewhere that has a specified amount of bandwidth. And then again, it's split in multiple different ways, and there's only that amount of bandwidth that all the customers south of it share. Otherwise, it costs thousands and thousands of dollars a month to provide dedicated bandwidth. And there are some people who have a use case for that. Those are usually businesses, large, medium, small enterprises, and they pay for a dedicated fiber line into their house, or into their business rather, not a house, but and we put a special device there, and that costs $2,000-3,000 a month, and there's an upfront charge for us to build it there, right? Which Grace highlighted earlier, which is several $1,000s. So that's a use case. Most people don't have that use case. From a bandwidth perspective, though, the only thing that's different in the delivery is that one delivery is light, the other one is RF connectivity. So the only way that fiber is better than coaxial, hybrid fiber coaxial, is that it doesn't have a signal to noise ratio issue. So the example that Grace gave where somebody nicks a line and it introduces noise into the network, that is not something that's a vulnerability from a fiber perspective. But fiber is glass. And so fiber breaks much easier. In fact, we have a fiber cut going on, in a different community that we're dealing with right now, because it's much more fragile. People break it all the time. And I can tell you, as somebody who runs our network operations center and deals with fiber cuts on a daily basis, we rarely have cuts to the HFC plant that are affecting a large group of people. Fiber to the home and fiber in general, we have those fiber cuts that we deal with all the time. And it's also much harder to repair because I can't just come out there and run a new cable between these 2 points or cut the cable and put a fitting in there and reattach it. I have to bring somebody out here with a fiber splicing trailer to splice the fiber. And now I got a trailer out here that takes several hours to do with specialized equipment. So there's advantages and disadvantages both ways. People think that fiber is necessarily better because Google moved forward with fiber. But by far and away, most people who have been building and overbuilding and putting all these huge fiber networks out there have abandoned it because it's not more reliable. It doesn't deliver necessarily a better experience for the customer. And the cost to deploy it is astronomical as compared to the hybrid fiber coaxial network. So Verizon's a great example. For a while, they were deploying their Fios product in communities across the Northeast, and they stopped doing it because they were losing so much money on it because no one was willing to pay the additional cost to have fiber in those instances. So it's a give and take. And I think the other thing that's important is for networks in communities, especially like yours, if it's a community where we have, poles going up and down alleyways and, really old neighborhoods, and we can go up there and run new cables, that's a lot easier than us trenching up your entire community to run new cables, trenching underneath your main drives here, trenching underneath your driveways, trenching up your yard to put the fiber in the ground. That's a huge effort and it's a huge inconvenience to your neighborhood at the end of the day for very little gain. So
he had mentioned RG59 being in his house. It's not only your yard that's going to get overhauled and have to be redone, your home itself has to be set up to accommodate a fiber network. You got to get a fiber feed in there. You've got RG59 running throughout the house, but you want to network it with Cat 6. The same, things that are going to happen in the yard and getting the stuff in the entire neighborhood, it's going to happen in every individual house, especially the older ones, to work with the new system. So that's why we are able to do the same thing. Like Grace said, you wouldn't see a difference. At the end of the day, you're cutting up your drywall, you're cutting up your house just to get the fiber optic and the Cat 6 in there. And you're doing the same thing to the yard, the sewer, and the irrigation just to get the fiber optic in the ground. And at the end of the day, you're looking at the exact same product. Each one has different vulnerabilities, but you're ending up in the same spot.
Yeah, your box on the outside of your home and what's on the inside of your home is really the only noticeable difference as a user perspective. Right over there.
Let's change the subject a little bit to pricing. I'm actually asking this question for somebody else who wanted to be at the meeting, but she had another meeting.
Yes.
So I'm going to give you a mix of two. She's got Hargray, cable only,
Yeah.
$93 a month.
Yeah, it's expensive.
Okay. I actually had Hargray, and somewhere back around 2018, when T-Mobile came out with internet, I switched over to that.
Okay.
$50 a month. Same service as Hargray as far as deliverance of gigabytes or megabytes per minute or second or whatever. Price has not gone up. On the other hand, the person who has Hargray, her subscription just for the
Cable.
internet goes up yearly.
Well, that
Now,
shouldn't
just to
happen.
give you an idea, I've only had T-Mobile since 2018, so we're only talking a few years here.
Right.
I have not had a price increase. However, before they got into internet, I've had T-Mobile for my cell phones since about 2003.
Okay.
I am paying the same price for my cell phones now as I did in 2003. If there are other companies that can keep their subscription rate flat for years, I don't understand two things. Why does Hargray charge as much for internet as they do? And the second thing is, why do they find it necessary to increase prices yearly or bi-yearly?
So in Moss Creek, if she's getting her price raised, she's not on the community-based pricing. So she absolutely needs to call in and be put on community-based pricing.
Say that
Because
again, what is that term called?
You have community-based pricing in Moss Creek.
Yeah, I believe she does.
So you have a price lock on your internet and it will not go up. So if she is seeing an increase, it means she is not on the community-based pricing. She's
So what
on,
is the community-based pricing for internet alone?
depends on the level of speed she's at, but it starts at $60 a month for 200 megabits. And then it's $70 a month for 300 megabits. $80 a month for 500 megabits. Plus the taxes, equipment, and fees. So if she's seeing any other differences, she's not on it. But as for TV, that's a completely different animal. So,
No TV.
okay,
Yeah, just to touch on cellular, so your
Yeah.
T-Mobile is a cellular connection, right? So it's no different than the internet connection you get to your phone. It's basically a hotspot, basically, that they power your home. And so T-Mobile likes to think that they're gonna come in and be the internet provider of the future. What most people don't know is that T-Mobile gets their internet connection from us, actually. Every cell tower in this area has a fiber connection from Hargray.
So they get their power from you.
Yes.
So they're paying you to tap into your power and they can still deliver to me for $50.
Right.
So
But-
why $93 to bypass T-Mobile and just run the power here?
so
So
Exactly.
the difference is in the quality of the service and how it's delivered. So like a LTE connection or a 5G connection or a 4G connection uses radio waves to enter your home. So there's lots of things that can interfere with radio waves. In addition to that, they don't always penetrate buildings consistently. Certain building materials have issues. But fundamentally, the biggest problem is that it's not really unlimited data in the sense that you would see on our network. If you use it for streaming video and streaming content, you're going to get to the point where they throttle your connection. If you use over a certain amount of bandwidth on any of those cellular providers, I know I actually have a hotspot that I take to places with me, and that's because I'm sometimes in troubleshooting an internet connection and the internet's down, so I need to be able to connect. If we exceed a certain threshold there, our speed gets significantly reduced. And the pool of bandwidth that we talk about at the node and for fiber to the premise customers, that pool of bandwidth is even smaller on a LTE connection, which is what those wireless radios have. And so what they count on really is that people aren't using the internet in one place significantly and heavily. They count on people moving from tower to tower. The other thing to note there is that when there is a capacity issue, so let's say everybody is using it at the same time, if everybody in this community switched to a LTE connection, what would happen is the tower near here would be saturated. And you know what they'd be looking to do? They'd be looking to put up 50 of those ugly palm tree towers in your community to try and add additional capacity. And they'd be trying to pay us to provide an internet connection to it. So at the end of the day, they just don't have the capacity to support that kind of demand from consumers. So it really depends on what you're doing. If you just use the email and surf the internet, you'd probably be fine with it. If you want to stream media content, if you have multiple people in your home, if you're downloading things, if you have grandkids coming over and playing video games and all of that stuff, you're doing work from home and Zoom meetings, you're going to want a wired internet connection to your home.
Okay, well, everything you said, I use the computer a lot. I Zoom, I watch movies. I have had no problems. I've had no slowdowns. I've had no buffering issues. So everything you said hypothetically in the textbook looks good, but in reality, for $50 a month, I've had no outages, no slowdowns, no buffering, and it works perfectly fine. So if they can do that for $50 a month, and they're paying you to feed them the signal, why, when there is no charge to pay you to feed the signal, when you're bypassing and going directly into someone's home, why does it cost more?
The economics of two different companies are not apples to apples. T-Mobile is a global powerhouse, used to be owned by Deutsche Telekom, has billions of dollars. Hargray is a small company based locally with the need to invest millions of dollars to keep up our network and to grow our network. Totally different. It's the same thing you could say about why does a Mercedes cost more than a Ford? I mean, why does something cost more than something else?
The difference is that I can buy a Ford. I'm not forced to buy a Mercedes. And if
Well,
you live
you
in
made your
Wall
choice,
Street,
right? So you're happy with your choice.
You're forced to buy a Mercedes.
No,
No,
because you just said
because
you
you
have
have
T-Mobile.
T-Mobile.
Well, yeah, that came out in 2018.
Yeah.
And But people who need cable into their house because they're getting, in addition to internet, they're getting cable television and so on, you can't get that easily through the internet. So they're stuck with having to buy the Mercedes because the Ford's not available here.
Yeah, we made the service available. We can't, I mean, if someone else wants to make service available, they can make it available. I mean, we can only focus on what we did. I mean, we built in here a long time ago. We continue to upgrade the network. We know we've had some shortfalls, but we're going to fix those and we're going to continue to invest in the network. If someone else wants to come in and do that, you know, they can do it. I mean, the economics are going to be very difficult for them, but you know what? We're not afraid of the competition. The bottom line is if we fix and get you the service that you expect, then hopefully you'll be pretty happy with that. And if not, and you want to go to T-Mobile, that option exists. Right now, you don't have any other options. That's not our choice.
You had a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something because I had a lot of problems in January,
Yes.
and I've had problems all the way up till today. But you know, listening to everything, I think I understood. I had no problems with my Wi-Fi for 2 years, 0. I don't mind your pricing. The pricing with the community is fine. It's fair. But I changed from Dish over to YouTube, so I'm 100% on Wi-Fi. You had this slowdown you're talking about. I couldn't watch anything. Every night between 8 and 10 o'clock, boom, boom. And this has been up until last night. It happened again. But I do call. You got great people that I speak to, and I told the guy I was out today. I appreciate that because I can't get anybody at YouTube. You can't get anybody to come out from Dish. All right, their prices skyrocketed once I got off the.
Yeah.
Get the invite.
Yeah.
So I'm on YouTube, working fantastic. So is your Wi-Fi. And today he put in 2 new boxes,
Perfect.
you know, and I have to say, I love having somebody locally we can deal with. I don't want my own equipment because I'll be replacing it myself. It is expensive. You also have to put it in. You better know what you're doing when you put it in, and you gotta maintain it. So I like what you do, and it's fair.
Thank you for that, sir. And if I may add one comment, because I think people know this, but I want to point it out because you may not think of it. You know, Hargray, we were bought by Cable One, but the legacy Hargray still exists. The Low Country is extremely important to us. Without the Low Country, there is no Hargray, right? Bluffton is our biggest market, okay? And then Moss Creek is one of our biggest communities, if not the biggest. So it's very important to us. You see us here, we've got people flying in from Phoenix. All of us are based locally. Many of our associates live in Moss Creek. They live in Eagles Point. They live in Island West. They live wherever. We're local. And I guarantee you, because I'm in a lot of communities all the time, not only here, but in Beaufort and on Hilton Head Island. And there's nobody who has the concentration of folks that we have, the local technicians, the local call centers, the local management, the local networks, that would be willing to do that. Now, that doesn't make us better than anybody, but it tells you we really care about the communities and we have some issues to fix and we will fix them. So thank you for that comment.
Gentlemen here in the
I'm
red.
curious about something more than anything. You talked about burying a cable on the ground 10 feet, not 2 feet. It's more susceptible to get damaged closer it is to the surface. Is it mandatory that every house is hardwired from the street to the house, or can you send wireless signals to the house for internet?
So that's a great question.
Great question.
So I have actually seen in that committee that I talked about, Cable Labs, that's working on research and development they're working on technology that they call the wireless drop. So in the cable industry, the connection that runs from the street line to your home is called the drop. And they're working on technology that would be a wireless drop. The problem with it today is that the wireless drop is meant for those aerial lines, which are ugly. And I doubt in this beautiful community, you want, lines running up and down your street or poles everywhere. But wireless doesn't really penetrate the ground well, right? So we've got to come up with new ways of, how do we get that wireless to the surface? And maybe that's a small pedestal or something like that, but really that technology hasn't been fully fleshed out to the point where we would be able to deploy it. But it's something the industry is looking at, and it's appealing because with a short range of wireless like that, it's a lot less likely we'd have any interference, we'd have any fade or anything that would, hamper it from reaching your home.
So basically then every house is hardwired.
Yes,
Yes.
everyone is. In the back.
No wonder I don't get
So the homes are hardwired, but like I said, we moved in 2019, so everything was basically new. And the community we lived in prior to Moss Creek, our boxes to our TVs were wired to the wall with RG6. I brought all the RG6 over here and hooked it. We have 5 TVs. I had them all running before the guys even got there. I said, look, all you gotta do is hook up the box. They put wireless boxes in. We never had any problems with the hardwired boxes in our other community. We've got nothing but problems where we're at now. I spent a bunch of money on this new TV to put up in my bonus room. Never go upstairs because we sit there and try to watch it and it freezes. Do you guys recommend some type of jumper systems?
So depending on how your house is configured, it might be one of those cases that it's really needing a mesh system to be able to get the substantial signal to, through your up above, if depending on if it's 2 stories
Your
or 1
guys did
story.
come over, and it improved it a little bit, but you guys did come over.
You have Hargray TV.
Yeah, we have Hargray TV, and after my wife had all these issues Zooming with COVID, she went to Zoom meetings all the time. And you guys came out and we ran a hard wire right to her computer underneath the house, drove up through the floor, ran it right. That solved that. But we still weren't getting a signal upstairs. The guys came out, put another modem, another router, or one of those air ties upstairs in one of the spare bedrooms upstairs, and the TV is right around the corner from that, the large screen. And it still sits there. You can watch
Generally speaking, the wireless boxes we have aren't working off of those air ties. They're working off of a different piece of equipment.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different ways that the system could be configured. There's many paths to the same destination. Even in the other neighborhood that you were in, fed by fiber, sometimes we're utilizing the wiring that's at the house to wire the boxes. Other times we're using a wireless situation. This is gonna be a specific case to figure out what's gonna be the best fit for you.
Okay.
So
The
stay
guys
out.
have been out several times.
Yeah, stay out, stay over, we'll get your address down.
Okay.
I'll work with you. There was another question over here, I think. Maybe not. I just seen hands going up. Yes,
I'll ask another question.
okay, go for it.
So as far as, this Cable One Hargray thing, so is Hargray a Cable One company? Or is Hargray going to become a Cable One in name? What's that mean?
Yeah.
For us?
That's a great question. There's a lot to that. Right now, Hargray is basically operating autonomously with people from Cable One working with the Hargray team to discover everything that's here, working on improving things, working on getting ready to integrate. Eventually, we will integrate it within the Cable One footprint, and the name may change at some point. It may not. We haven't gotten to that point. That would be well communicated when we get there. But Cable One is, also an American-based company. We don't outsource support anywhere. If you call Cable One, you're always talking to somebody in the United States. You're never going to a foreign country. We intend to maintain a presence in this community because we have a sizable presence in the community in terms of associates that work for us and in terms of customer base and talented resources that work for us. So we're going to maintain our presence here. We will still have, all the same things that we've had in the past. So I don't think a lot's going to change from what you're used to and how you interface with us. What will change is the amount of investment you'll see within the technology and with the evolution of the technology going forward. And maybe a name change at some point, but that's not my department. So we'd have to get a marketing guy up here for that.
And one last follow-up on that. So does Cable One have a different process or communication vehicle for letting customers know when there's an outage? Because when we had the outage at Christmas time, it's a good example because everybody had the problem.
Everyone, yeah.
You couldn't get in, couldn't make a phone call, or you couldn't contact the center. At least I tried for an hour, didn't work. And you obviously don't have internet unless your cell phone connection is working. You can't get onto the website, but even that, you don't necessarily list that, oh, we've got this kind of problem in these communities or whatever.
So thank you for bringing that up. For phone lines, I'll direct over to Wes. This is a very interesting one that I didn't know about either. So
Well, let me just say this, and when I dive in to answer that question, Cable One is looking at solving these problems as well. These are problems that exist for everyone, right? We're looking to invest in better customer experience. So I think, if you will think back to, I'm a fan of Seinfeld, so I think back to the 90s, there's a Seinfeld episode where Kramer's doing battle with the cable guy and wants the cable guy to arrive, and he's, giving him a vague time when he's going to be there, and then the cable guy ends up waiting for him. And so cable got a bad rap as not being customer focused, not being customer centric. And I think we have done a lot to perpetuate that negative connotation with all of our consumers and all of our customers being you guys. And so we're working really hard as an industry, but particularly in Cable One, to improve what we call the customer experience. And that's how you interface and interact with us. So we're looking to give you options with how you communicate with us, whether that's a chat bot, so you can chat with somebody in person, or a call, so that you can get support through an app and manage these things. From a proactive communication standpoint, we want to be able to give you an in-browser notification that pops up like a little bubble that says, hey, there's going to be a maintenance in your neighborhood on X date, expect some downtime, or hey, your bill's due, or things like that. I'm again not a marketing guy, so I don't know what all the uses would be, but we want to make sure that when you call in, if you do choose to call, that the automated system that you hit recognizes your telephone number and immediately tells you if there's a problem in your area. So you don't waste your time sitting on the phone waiting to talk to somebody to have them tell you something that you already know, right? And then we want to have automatic callback features and everything you can possibly think of that you may have experienced at another company. When you call in, we want to have all those things. So we have an aggressive roadmap to deploy those things, and that's absolutely going to extend to the Hargray markets that we serve as well. So
Hargray has, yeah.
we have some of
we
it.
have some of
They
it.
call, they may not recognize the phone number, but they'll tell you that there's an issue in the Boston area.
So surprisingly enough, on the Christmas issue, since there were so many people in such a diverse area in all of Bluffton calling in all at once, it actually went over capacity for what those phone lines could handle for that
You get a
automated
fast
system.
distribution.
And it essentially was like,
4,000 calls coming in at once, you can't put them all.
yeah, it basically was like, sorry.
Yeah, 10 gallons in a 5-gallon bucket is what that was. So we don't want to have that happen. Cable One has a lot more capacity for our contact center application, which we'll be moving everybody to. But I think the message I want you to leave with, as far as getting in contact with us, is we're working on providing a multitude of ways for you to interact with us and get support when you need it, or get a question answered when you need it. And we want to make sure that we're communicating the way that you want to be communicated with. So if you prefer text messages, we want to make sure that you can get a text message update about an outage or a service call or something like that that's happening. If you want to chat, using the web app, I'm an introvert, so this takes a lot of energy for me to stand up here and talk to all of you. But I would prefer to never talk to anybody ever. I would prefer to be on my phone and just message with somebody. I'm sure you all know somebody like that. You guys may or may not have heard of Uber. You may not have used Uber, but there's a term that goes around the industry. It's called Uberization, right? And that's really taking what Uber did for the taxi, community and the taxi business, which is make it extremely easy for everybody, right? Keeps the customer informed. If you think about taxi, you call for a taxi and it maybe arrives, maybe it doesn't, but it's certainly not going to get you to where you want to be on time, and then what are you going to take your odds of hailing a taxi or finding a taxi? And then your taxi driver might be a crazy person and drive like a maniac. They might try and rip you off, they might try and take you on a dubious route to run your bill up. So if you think about all the problems that were with taxis, and what Uber solved was it made that easy. It informed the consumer. It kept them up to date on where the car was that was coming to get them. It showed them their pictures, so you knew what was coming. All of these things were great. And we want to do that same thing for your experience when you interact with us, when you need support. And by the way, with all the investments we're making into the plant and all the hundreds of millions of dollars we plan on spending, a lot of those are going to be spent on things like automation. And so when there is an outage or things that are detected, we're taking steps to fix it before you even notice there's a problem. And so we want to get to the point where you never even need to call us. And that's where that aspirational 100% reliability comes from. But if you do need us for some reason, we want you to be able to communicate with us the way that you want to be communicated with.
We've got time for about 2 more questions before filling up. Yes, sir?
I'm not sure I understood the answer when you were given about Hargray and cable. Hargray is now like a division of Cable One.
Yes,
You
Yes.
own Cable.
Yes.
Hargray.
yes.
Yes.
So we're really dealing with Cable One now. We're not dealing with
Well, I mean,
Hargray. Hargray is just a path.
fundamentally, it's still a separate business unit today. I would say it's getting a lot of guidance and support from the Cable One business,
Yes.
but we're not out here micromanaging and telling these people what to do. All of their systems and processes are in place. We will come out here. There's no sacred cows in the Cable One world. So if Hargray is doing something better than we're doing in Cable One, even though we're a much bigger company, we're going to take the Hargray way. Because at the end of the day, we want to do what's best for our customers. And I think, Hargray does a lot of things really well out here. I can tell you, I've worked for Cable One for 15 years. I've never been invited to talk in front of a community before, and maybe that's because I'm horrible at it. I'll let you guys be the judge of that. But this is a great opportunity. They have this community outreach. Grace and her team being here to talk to you guys. That's something we don't do in Cable One. And so we're taking a lot of lessons from their book, and we intend to apply those to our broader business.
One more question? Anybody?
Good, thank you.
Okay, thank you guys so